Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. And today I welcome Terry Haynes to Author's Corner. She has written a wonderful novel called Passages of Hope, which is published by Barbour Publishing, and she'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Let me tell you a little bit about Terry. She is a prolific knitter, business owner, freelance graphic artist, former Army wife, and she says left the Army, not the husband, and mother of 3 living outside of Washington, D.C. Terry, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure.
So the book is titled Passages of Hope, and it's actually book 10 in the Doors to the Past series put out by Barbour Publishing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the series and how it's unique, but also how you became involved in it? And is this the only book you've written in that series?
This is the only book, and the series is historical places in the United States. So if you look at the other books in the series, there's some set in the Biltmore. There's one set in what is dubbed the most haunted hotel in the United States. They're set in different places, and I got involved. I had written previously some novellas about the Underground Railroad. And so that became my historical location, and I'm doing that quote unquote because the Underground Railroad isn't a centralized location like the Biltmore.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the book as a whole. What is the storyline in Passages of Hope?
So in the book, my main modern character is named Gracie, and she has had a bit of a troubled life. And her beloved grandmother passes and leaves her the house in her will, her grandmother's house. But she makes Gracie promise that she will fulfill her dream and open a yarn store in the ground floor of the house. Well, as Gracie is doing some renovations on the house, she finds a secret room. Mm-hmm. Then for the historical character, she is Olivia, and she is a conductress on the Underground Railroad, meaning she is moving people through her home to freedom. But there is some trouble in the community of conductors, and they have to find out who is behind this trouble. Mm. That's a good synopsis without giving away the plot.
Exactly. Well, I have read the book, and so that was a pretty tight synopsis. So
Thank you.
Very interesting. And, for somebody such as myself who doesn't know too much about the Underground Railroad, it was a little of an introduction to that. It doesn't go into a tremendous amount of information, but what kind of research did you have to do for the book just to include it in your storyline?
As I said, I had written previous books on the Underground Railroad. So this was just kind of a continuation of research.
Okay.
But lots of reading historical newspapers from the 1800s, lots of reading, getting my hands on academic level textbooks with the information. But my best resource was the father of the Underground Railroad, William Still, actually wrote a book called The Underground Railroad, where he includes firsthand accounts of people who had escaped. So that was the way he processed newly freed people. He collected their stories, often with the goal of finding out if they had run and left somebody behind, if they had other family members, if he could assist them, if he could reunite them with somebody who maybe had previous run. It is a very detailed book. So lots of time. I live in Maryland, and my local library has some of the best historical resources. So I just used my library card, which is even better. So, yeah.
Yay, plugs for public libraries.
Hey, look, if you're paying your taxes, you might as well get a library card. That's
there you go. Well, and in fact, you include some research facilities, I don't remember exactly which ones, in your book because your characters had to do some research too, didn't they?
They did. In the process of, I guess this isn't too much of a spoiler, but in the process of discovering some history about the house, Gracie, the modern character, does some genealogy research, and an interesting outcropping or result of that is I started doing some genealogy research on myself just to see how the process would go. Like, there were pieces of information that Gracie needed to find for the story to move forward, and I was like, could I find those things for myself? So I started doing some research and discovered some things about my family, and I was like, oh, okay.
Anything that was quite a surprise for you?
Yeah, my paternal grandfather was born in 1886, and that's 2 lifetimes. So, like, my dad and my parents were born in the 40s. So my grandfather died at 80, but he was born in 1886.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, okay, so let's go maternal side. Maternal grandparents were born in the 30s.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking 30s, 20s, I should find my grandfather. No.
Wow.
Did not find my grandfather in the 30s and 20s. Had to go back 20 years to find him.
Wow.
So that was very, very eye-opening that he had seen that much of times changing.
Yes.
Like his grandfather was probably enslaved.
Yeah.
Depending on, based on the research that I found in the area. So just to know that he lived, like I said, 2 lifetimes.
Yeah.
Worth of life. So that was very interesting. And I also found out a shocking thing about my father, that he was born by a midwife and they didn't record his birth. So when he became an adult to join Vietnam, he didn't have a birth certificate. So the fun part was, and it was really an interesting lesson on how documents and history is passed, how they verified him was the family Bible and my aunt going down and signing an affidavit.
Cool.
So the fact that the family Bible was basically a legal standing document is just amazing to me.
Amen. Very interesting things that you have already dug up.
Right.
Well, let me remind the listeners that I'm talking with Terry Haynes regarding her book, Passages of Hope, which is published by Barbour Publishing. And you're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. So one of your main characters, as you've mentioned, Gracie Kingston, lacked self-confidence. And that was something I really picked up on in your book. So why was that an important aspect of your story?
Mainly because I have found so many believers who have built a mindset about themselves, but not necessarily based on any facts. So here Gracie is thinking she is beneath or worthless or incompetent, instead of looking at the track record of experiences that she had to make her who she was and the value that had. Not always do we value the hard stuff that makes us grow. We kind of, I'm not successful because I don't have this thing. But it's like, but you survived this thing with the Lord's help, and that should build your confidence for the new thing. I personally regularly tell myself, Terry, you've been through worse than this. Like, come on, get it together, girl. You've been through worse than this. So that was something I wanted to explore because I had ran into so many believers who just had this mindset about themselves without taking a proper catalog of themselves.
Very good. Then the other thing, of course, as I read in your bio, a prolific knitter, you included knitting in your story. And so was that just something that, because it was familiar with you, you thought you'd throw that in there? Or how did that come to be really kind of an important part of the story?
Okay, the short, non-cute answer is I didn't have time for any other research.
Okay.
I needed her to do something, but I was so deep in the Underground Railroad research, I was like, I need something that I know off the top of my head.
There you go.
That I could talk about at length, and knitting is it. So I started knitting at 11. I had 2 childhood friends, and their grandmother taught me to knit on pencils because she only had one set of knitting needles, and there were 3 of us. So I learned how to knit on pencils. And then when I got married, surprise, surprise, my husband, who was from Barbados, knew how to crochet. So we taught each other our yarn craft, and I have been prolifically knitting probably since my early 30s. I just turned 50 this year. And I'm standing in a room full of yarn right now. Just readers, listeners, I wish you could see it. But I knit when he's also retired Army, as you said. When he was deployed, I knit 11 sweaters that year to keep my sanity. Like, fast as I could finish one, I'd start another one. So it really has been a very, very important. I knit in church. Mm-hmm. I used to lose there's a thing called a stitch marker. And you put it on your knitting when it's time to do something else, or you want to mark a section of your knitting. I would find my stitch markers in church because they fell off during Bible study, and I'd be sitting in church on Sunday going, over there underneath those chairs, that little green thing really looks like a stitch marker, but I don't remember losing one. So I would knit through conferences. I would knit through church services. So knit in hospitals. I used to keep a project in my car, knitting while I was commuting. So at stoplights. But so it is really a part of my life. Now here's the really interesting part about this book. So, finished the book. She opens a yarn store. I did all the research, talked to some yarn store friends. How did you start your yarn store? What did you do? Did all my research. And then last year for June, for my 50th birthday, I opened a yarn store.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, hey, I already got the research. I already know what to do, thanks to the book. So my yarn store is located here in Fort Washington, Maryland, very near my house. So I now have my yarn store and the book that inspired it.
Well, all right. Well, why don't you tell our readers how they can keep up to date with you, with your new books and events that you're involved with?
TerryJHaynes.com is my website. My socials are Terry. Instagram is TerryJ.Haynes. Facebook is author Terry J. Haynes. And of course, you can always get this book from Barbour's website.
And do you have something that you're working on for the future already?
Yes. I've moved 20 years forward into reconstruction and toying around with an idea on reconstruction, a fiction book based in reconstruction. So it's very, very not ready. I haven't even really pitched it to anybody yet. So, yes, but I am working on that and a couple of other manuscripts that I'll probably either pitch or self-publish this year.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll just encourage the listeners to stay up on all of that through your website, Terry J. Haynes, and remind them the book we're talking about today is Passages of Hope, and it's written by Terry Haynes and published by Barbour Publishing, and we certainly appreciate them giving us a copy of the book to talk about. And Terry, thank you so much for being with us on KNEO today.
You're very, very welcome.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can find it on your favorite podcast provider. Join us again next time on Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster.
Do you have 5 minutes for God? I'm Pastor Ed Wilson, and I believe there's no better way to begin each morning than spending a little time with Him. That's why every weekday morning I bring you a short devotional broadcast designed just for that. Look up God's 5 minutes wherever you get your podcasts to kickstart your spiritual walk for each day. We'll always do it in 5 minutes or less. Have you talked to God today?